Hello, hello. This is Kevin Gosztola, managing editor for Shadowproof. Let's get the colors correct here for the uh, branding here. Hello, hello. I'm Kevin Gosztola, managing editor for Shadowproof. Normally, I would save this for Thursday because I do a weekly show covering whistleblowers and I provide updates on WikiLeaks and what's going on with Julian Assange. But we've got so much happening in the last 24 hours here, and it feels very fluid. Like there will be plenty to talk about on Thursday. And I feel like doing some more of these live streams as we get to the end of Trump's presidency. And there's a whole lot, again, there's a whole lot happening with Julian Assange being in prison while there's a COVID outbreak, complaints about how freezing cold it is, needing proper clothing, and the prison administration won't give him what he needs. We also have, and this is what I want to focus on primarily, a lot of discussion here about pardons. There's a lot of discussion going on about Donald Trump and the power he has available, and will he or won't he give Julian Assange a pardon? Will he give Edward Snowden a pardon? I don't believe he'll give Reality Winner a pardon. I don't believe that she's someone that uh, likely makes his cut for someone who deserves a pardon. Nonetheless, I am someone who believes that she definitely should be allowed out of prison to have her sentence ended right now, and her name should be cleared. But I want to first say at the top here that I reject the way in which these whistleblowers, these truth tellers who have faced unjust prosecution from the United States, I reject how there are people who are pitting them against one another. I want to first call out I think they're primarily like hashtag resistance libs who seem to think that one way of one-upping people who are pushing for Snowden's uh, an end to Snowden's prosecution under the Espionage Act or an end to Assange prosecution, that they think one way to prove that they're better than these other people is to say, I'm going to support Reality Winner. So you've got Reality Winner's case being positioned as this cause that people should support instead of Edward Snowden or instead of Julian Assange. I think that is awful. I think that is tremendously divisive. We hear a lot of people talk about sowing discord. They blame it on the Russians, or they blame it on Chinese bots, or whoever is on social media stirring up trouble. And I can think of nothing more divisive than trying to pick which is your favorite whistleblower to support. And I see a few people joining. Well, thank you for tuning in to hear me talk a little bit this evening about the pardons that may or may not be coming. We have some important news, and it is that Bill Barr is resigning from the Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, early. He will not be staying on until the end of his term. Potentially, he could have been there until the day that Joe Biden was inaugurated, and yet he's leaving. And I don't know exactly what this points to, but we've seen a lot of conversation ramp up about Edward Snowden. And we know that there are several people in Congress, in the House of Representatives, who support a pardon for Edward Snowden. There's at least one senator who supports a pardon for Edward Snowden. His name's Rand Paul. He's tweeted in support of Edward Snowden in the last day or so, standing up against people like Liz Cheney, who is still benefiting from the fact that Dick Cheney has not been held accountable for his involvement in torture and war crimes and the mass atrocities that he made possible in the destruction of an entire country in Iraq. So we know that at least one senator supports a pardon for Edward Snowden, and I believe that this is a rare occasion, but I'm going to agree with Bill Kristol, neoconservative man who's behind pushing such efforts in the Never Trump realm, like the Lincoln Project, the feckless Lincoln Project that didn't really move any votes at all, and is a failed operation other than the fact that it hugely enriched anyone who was involved in it. But he says, and I think he's right to point this out, that this may suggest that Barr is getting out before Trump pardons people like Assange and Snowden. And if that is true, I am celebrating. I know that Bill Kristol is weeping, but I'm willing to send him a box of tissue in the mail. I'll put WikiLeaks hourglasses on it so that he can wipe his tears that he is feeling. You know, maybe the Kleenex can be documents that Edward Snowden exposed, and he can wipe his eyes with the evidence and proof of mass surveillance that was revealed by Edward Snowden. I'll send this box to Bill Kristol so that he can mark this moment, because I definitely will be celebrating if Donald Trump gives Edward Snowden a pardon, or if Julian Assange winds up with a pardon. That, to me, will be spectacular. And I have Bill Barr's quote in front of me that he gave as this conversation ramped up earlier this year. The Associated Press covered Bill Barr as he spoke out in August of 2020. And he said that he would be vehemently opposed to a pardon for Edward Snowden, which, suggested that the Justice Department is captured and would never allow Donald Trump to do what he would like if he would feel that Edward Snowden deserved a pardon. And Barr said he was a traitor, and the information he provided our adversaries greatly hurt the safety of the American people. He was peddling it around like a commercial merchant. We can't tolerate that. That's fine. I mean, I don't think he was peddling it around like a commercial merchant. I don't really feel that Edward Snowden did a very good job if he was a commercial merchant, because that would suggest going to all of the most biggest media companies and the Silicon Valley companies, tech companies, and allowing them to see his cache of documents and to maybe upload them to their own private servers. And he wouldn't have shared them with us. He would have been trying to profit off of the intelligence he had collected. And, by the way, I think this would be totally illegal and reprehensible and something that I would favor shutting down. In fact, we know that this is how former government officials function. This is what the revolving door is. And not all the time do they take documents, but they take what they have in their head and they go to corporations and they then enrich themselves off the fact that they know how institutions work. And this has been done before. And so I don't believe he's a commercial merchant. I think that he is a whistleblower who revealed numerous documents. And I know that Glenn Greenwald recently sent out an article with his newsletter that lays out the case for a pardon. And I mean, we all know what Edward Snowden revealed. And, I see that Liz Cheney has called him out because she believes that he gave information to China and Russia, which is something that has been common for people to say if they do not like, uh, because they do not like Edward Snowden. It's been common to say this. Well, in fact, there's just no evidence that any of this information was ever directly provided. And, for it to be a treasonous offense, you have to directly give it to people who are running these governments. That's the crime. That's how it becomes something where you can accuse someone of being a spy. It's not. You can't say it's been published on the internet, it's available to the Russians and the Chinese, or it's available to terrorists. That's stupid. That's plainly stupid. There's no way that we can have freedom of the press and freedom of information and a free exchange of ideas if that's the way it's going to be. He blew the whistle on mass surveillance, and he provided these documents to the people, and that's why he's been punished, because they want this to stop. They don't want another Snowden who comes forward and reveals more information about the way not only mass surveillance works, but anything that national security agencies do. They don't want us to know what's being done in our name. And so that's why people like Bill Barr are upset. I know that John Brennan has stepped in with his toad-like face to say something about how Snowden doesn't deserve a pardon, and he despises him, and he's also sticking up for his friend and pal lying James Clapper. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why people are so opposed to Snowden being granted this pardon is because they're probably invested in these very institutions that he exposed. It's just that simple. Like, most of these people who do not want pardons for Snowden or Assange are implicated in this system themselves. And we should ask who pays them, who pays their salaries, who are they working for, who do they actually represent. We should look at the money that they receive, and that's an easy way to tell why they are opposed. We should look at the agencies in which they protect and do not want to hold accountable. We should look at the way in which they do not challenge the security apparatus as it expands in its power, and the expansions of the Patriot Act that they allow. We should see how they're always on the wrong side, and the way that they're deferential to people in these agencies. I mean, these individuals who are going to trash Snowden and also are going to come after Julian Assange if they're pardoned are the very people who fabricated ideas and notions about Donald Trump being some kind of agent who was deputized by President Vladimir Putin to work and undermine the United States for the last 4 years. Just the collusion narrative, but not just the collusion narrative, but even like outright saying that he had become a Russian agent without any evidence whatsoever. I mean, I have to agree with anyone who looks at the outrage over Donald Trump and his people spinning lies and distortions about electoral fraud, and then scratch their head and say, wait, what? Like, this is coming from the same people who spun a bunch of lies and distortions about Vladimir Putin and the Russians being involved in interference in the election. And so what? We're supposed to just let you have some kind of credibility to say what's right and wrong here? No, I mean, it's absolutely hypocritical. So I don't know if Donald Trump actually cares about what Edward Snowden revealed. I don't know if he cares or even knows what Julian Assange published and why he's being prosecuted. But if it's in some way he arrives at these pardons, it'll be remarkable. There are people from both sides, progressive, a handful of progressives, some conservatives in the Congress who are willing to stick their necks out and back this, even though it's going to make it clear that anyone who works in intelligence agencies aren't going to want to talk with them or treat them respectfully. So They're choosing not to be institutionally captured and to support this pardon, and which I think is popular. I think that people really do want to see Edward Snowden be able to return home and not have to live out his life in Russia. And like effectively, that makes him a pawn of a government that is treated as an adversary by our country. He's a victim of geopolitics. And that's also what Assange is. He's a victim of US geopolitics. He's treated as someone who was a cutout for Russian intelligence without any proof presented whatsoever. Like, you can go through the Mueller report and find these thin assertions that they've never been able to confirm. Otherwise, I'm sure there would be much, much more said specifically about WikiLeaks. Instead, they have to speak in very vague terms, but that's good enough to cast aspersions and fuel the character assassination. Yet, uh, I think when we look at these cases, my thought got broken there. I think when we look at these cases, we find that they each represent in some way, whether we're talking about Reality Winner or Snowden or Assange, they represent the very real way that the war on whistleblowers spiraled out of control and was started. This all goes back to President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. This happened while he was in the White House. If he can claim credit for things that Obama did, he has to take responsibility for the very negative things that happened under his watch. And so we know that Julian Assange and Snowden and Reality Winner all have faced prosecution under the Espionage Act as it becomes a favorable way for the Justice Department to control and clamp down on the free flow of information, to limit our access and our ability to get materials we deserve to be able to read. So let me see here. I'm just going to pause for a moment and see how some of you are doing, tuning into the chat. Thank you very much for watching this little broadcast here. It's just a small little independent update that I'm doing, and I appreciate your interest. Let's see here. I'm going to go back. I have quite a few comments, so it's good to see you. And so I have a question that's unrelated to what I'm talking about here about Jimmy Dore's idea to force Medicare for all vote on the floor. I can say something about it, but let me finish up here with the pardons and what I have to say about whistleblowers. I see Mad Mom saying I'm behind as all get out. Binge catch up from taking 2 days off. Yeah, there's been a lot that's happened in the last 48 hours. It's been a whirlwind. And then, yes, I did get a haircut. Thank you, Fetish Magic. And Nancy says we should also remember Jeremy Hammond. Jeremy is great too, and Jeremy's been released, and he's on his way to freedom. But yes, I don't want to take anything from him. Unfortunately, he's not in as dire need, so I wouldn't put him at the top of the list. But Jeremy is in a group of people who deserve to have their names cleared. He wasn't prosecuted under the Espionage Act. He was accused of violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Although he was involved in the Stratfor files publication, and that's material that WikiLeaks published. I'll throw in these other people who need to be cared about as well. These are much lesser known individuals. Terry Albury is an FBI whistleblower who's currently or was serving time in prison, and he worked with the FBI in Minnesota. He exposed information about the way in which the FBI was using race or racial profiling in order to manipulate individuals into becoming informants. And for doing that, for exposing that system. He faced a prosecution under the Espionage Act. He pled guilty to it because he himself knows how difficult it is to win a case in court. His lawyers definitely would have advised him that he would have difficulty. And so he went to prison. And he, I believe, has been in prison while the COVID-19 pandemic has been ravaging facilities. One of the worst times ever. As Reality Winner herself knows, she contracted the virus. One of the reasons why we've been advocating for her release, because we know that prisoners like her are vulnerable, and she definitely should be freed. Regardless of whether Donald Trump has the political inclination or not, Reality Winner should be freed from prison. I see Artie. Thank you for your comments. Saying civil disobedience safeguards freedom and prevents tyranny. Absolutely. And Mr. K reminds that Seymour Hersh broke the story of the My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War and many stories since. Yep. And still doing great journalism today, especially on Syria, a kind of journalism that no mainstream outlets, no establishment outlets would touch. So it landed in the London Review of Books. And that's what he had to settle for because nobody in the world would touch it. Faint Signals brings up the David McBride case, who is being persecuted in Australia for the Afghan files, and that he's a whistleblower and that we must support him. Yeah, I support David McBride. I covered David's case on the weekly show that I do a few weeks ago. But it's something that I should and I plan to return to because, outside of the U.S., this is an important whistleblower case. This is something, and I think it points to U.S. criminality as well. Why are these Australian soldiers deployed to Afghanistan? Because of a war that the U.S. started almost 2 decades ago, and a war that has now spanned an entire generation, where this year we're hearing constant conversation from people talking about how their sons or their daughters are going off to a war in which they were deployed to fight in after the 9/11 attacks. It's, it's like something, the fact that this is still ongoing, it's like something out of Starship Troopers, that it's like we're never done. And we're always going to be deploying people to these parts of the world. And hey, Wesley, and hello, everyone. Thank you, Marta, for your donation. I really appreciate it. Let me tell you all, while you are watching, that at the Dissenter newsletter over at dissenter.substack.com, I recently put up and sent out a guest contribution from CIA whistleblower Jeffrey Sterling. And this goes with what we're talking about here with Julian Assange. Jeffrey Sterling is he's the first person who has contributed to the newsletter. We are paying him, and we're so glad that we're able to feature his opinions and share his experience facing unjust prosecution under the Espionage Act, and why he sees it as something that is very similar to what happened to him with Julian Assange. He breaks it down. He looks at the sentencing and how Julian Assange will face great difficulty and injustice. And he also breaks down what the sentence will be like in prison, what it'll be like for him to go through prison, and how he won't be able to have access to healthcare, something that Jeffrey Sterling had to endure himself. He went through an episode where he had a heart attack and couldn't get attention, immediate medical attention. And I remember using my platform to publish a letter from him, to publish answers that I had, answers to questions that I had about what he was experiencing in the prison facility in Colorado where he was incarcerated. And it was our efforts. It was the journalism that independent people did, and it was the work that people did all throughout the globe in the U.S. and outside who cared about what was happening to Jeffrey Sterling that really ensured that he did not die in prison. And now he's free, and he feels burdened by the Assange prosecution. So if you go to dissenter.substack.com, it's the Assange prosecution, a haunting reminder of what happened in my Espionage Act case. In fact, why don't we use the technology here, and I will bring it up, and it's very simple. So here, this is the article that I'm talking about, and you can see a picture of Jeffrey Sterling. If you're unfamiliar with him, he was a prosecution in the Obama era. He was convicted in 2015, I believe he was convicted, and he did time in prison. And now he is writing about this and using his voice to challenge what he sees as an inevitable outcome. It'll inevitably end in duress and anguish. And I think he knows better than anyone what lies ahead for Julian Assange if we allow him to be brought to the United States and be put on trial. To him, it definitely means Assange would be found guilty. He'll be convicted. He'll be in Alexandria jail like Jeffrey Sterling was. That's what Jeffrey would say. And there will be injustice, and he could potentially die in a U.S. prison if he's given a very severe sentence. So that's the article over at the Dissenter, at the newsletter that I do at Substack. And so just pointing that out. All right, so let me get to a few comments, and then we'll wrap this. And I'm going to be coming in and out of here throughout the rest of the week to do some of these live streams as we round out the year. So let me say thank you to Han Standish, and who says, thanks, Kevin, vital information, watching here in Australia. So pleased to have people tuning in from Australia. It's great to know that people there are following this work. So let's go back up here and grab some earlier comments. Oh, thank you very much, Faint Signals. Daniel Hale. Daniel Hale is another one, has not made it to trial yet. I don't even know if we can even talk about plea deals or options for having a shortened sentence guaranteed the same way that Reality Winner was able to, although it didn't end up being that short of a sentence. But in fact, it was the longest sentence that anyone has ever received for an unauthorized disclosure. And it was one document too. So just that tells you that none of these, it's really difficult to compare these cases. We see it happen very disingenuously and opportunistically. This is what prosecutors in the Crown Prosecution Service do. In the UK, we've seen it done by Gordon Kromberg, and this guy who's treated like a saint in the Assange case without us ever able to question him and what he has to say. But Daniel Hale revealed a lot about our drone assassination complex. He provided materials that Jeremy Scahill ended up using. They were released as the drone papers. He is an important whistleblower. This material came out just as some of the most fierce challenges against Barack Obama's administration and their use of drones was taking place. So we need to keep him in mind. I include him in the list of people who deserve to have their names cleared and pardoned. I've seen thrown out there the name Joshua Schulte because he was set up, it seemed framed, made to seem like he was the one responsible for Vault 7 materials. There are other allegations that have been levied against him that are unrelated to the claim that he may have been involved in revealing the materials. But that case ended in a mistrial in New York when he was first tried. So that might be someone to keep at the top of our list. I think almost anyone who has faced an Espionage Act prosecution has probably been abused and faced injustice just because of the nature of this law and the fact that it's always been used to go after dissenters, and that there are always other laws and other ways in order to go after people. But this seems to be the harshest way to make an example out of people. And it's become, it as a lot of advocates say, it's a sledgehammer that completely overdoes it, and it destroys the lives of these people. That is absolutely the intent. I see people echoing that Reality Winner deserves a pardon. ZT Socialist mentions that Liz Cheney and her family are evil and corrupt, and no telling how many war crimes they have covered up. Yes, yeah. I really don't think we need to listen to people in the Cheney family who are upset about pardons for whistleblowers when the rest of their lives are going to be benefited by the fact that there's no accountability for what Dick Cheney, in their family did as a member of the Bush administration. Let's conclude here. I'll get to a couple more parts. I see Fred mentioning Leonard Peltier. I don't have any problem with other political prisoners and covering their cases. I do a very specific show here highlighting whistleblowers that have come forward. So to conclude, I'll give it to you. It's on the minds of everyone that certainly are watching. What do I think about the demand that's put forward by Jimmy Dore, telling everyone that we need progressives in Congress like AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and others to not vote for Nancy Pelosi if she will not bring Medicare for all to a vote? What do I think of that? Well, I think I have more to say about the outrage towards that. The people who cannot stand that someone who calls himself a pothead comedian is making a demand of politicians. Why is it this person who is having an impact? Why is it Jimmy Dore who is going to lay down a marker and expose everyone who lacks principles? What has it come to in this country when this is who it falls to in order to step forward and make sure that some kind of challenge takes place in the Congress, because Nancy Pelosi should not be the Speaker of the House anymore? I mean, first off, I don't really care how people feel about this statement. She's in her 80s, and we need people to step aside, especially if you're against what the younger generations are for. If you're not going to advance the cause of justice and social progress, if you're just going to front for neoliberal interests and work on behalf of intelligence agencies and serve corporate power, you need to step aside, because you're not worth it, especially since we see what's going on with Dianne Feinstein. I don't know if you saw the article that came out about her staff briefing her, and she can't remember that she was briefed, and then she gets angry at her staff members like they're not doing their jobs when in fact they are. That's a dreadful and awful position for anyone working with her to be in. And she shouldn't be in the Senate. She should be retired. She should be where Harry Reid is, and other people who have retired. And why don't these people have to leave the Congress when they're no longer capable of doing their jobs? I mean, I consistently find myself thinking I'm not sure that Nancy Pelosi is capable of handling this position anymore because of how old she is. And you can call that ableist. You can say that you don't like that tack. You can tell me that I should just stick to political ideas. But, the mere fact is most of these people who are in the way of things like Medicare for all are in this older generation, in their late 60s, in their 70s, in their 80s. They're the ones standing in the way of this. And I think we needed to ask them to step aside and let these newer people, and it's not necessarily true that they're going to support Medicare for all. I mean, we may still have the same sets of problems that we have now, but I want to fight those people. I want to fight people who I'm sure have control of all of their mental faculties and aren't going to just hide behind. I mean, what is that the problem? It's going to be for the next 4 years with Joe Biden is, does he remember? Does he know what he's done? Does he have any idea about what he's saying? Is he lucid? Is he not? Can I criticize him? Does he know what he's talking about? This is an issue. We need to know that people are functioning human beings if they're going to have leadership positions. I don't think that's a tall ask. And it used to be that people would, I just think that at a certain point, once you get to an age, if you should just go be a grandparent, you should just leave and no longer be in the way. You should relinquish your power. And the fact that the Democratic Party won't ask some of these elders to relinquish their power and leave in dignity, I think it speaks to their corruption. I mean, obviously, the bench for them is not very deep when it comes to neoliberalism, and they're concerned. They see the younger people who, I know that this is what this is about. The younger people like Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Cori Bush and Ayanna Pressley and Rashida Tlaib and all of these people. These are individuals who they see pulling the Democratic Party in a direction that they dread. And they can't believe that they're going to have influence in the direction of the party. And I think that they're staying on and not retiring because they're so captured by the corporate influences within the party and the institutions that they serve, that the ones, that they get really upset and angry about Donald Trump disrespecting, whatever that's supposed to mean. So, yeah, I think that I'm fixated on the outrage against Jimmy because I think it shows that the people in our politics and in our media are so feckless and shameful. They don't do what they should do to step up and challenge people who are elected. And they should be doing that for the benefit of people who are downtrodden, are facing eviction, don't know what they're going to do to put food on their tables, how they're going to survive and pay their medical bills. There are very basic things that we should be able to demand of the people in our Congress, and it's that they will make demands and try to stand up for these things. Faint Signal says it well. The outrage and push against Dora's campaign exposes a lot, but it's not even really a campaign. Campaigns come with petitions. Campaigns come with pages that you can go to. Campaigns may come with rallies. There may be a bit of organizing. What Jimmy said was, I want you to impress upon. I just want you to uphold this on social media. That's how I understand it. I want you to tell AOC and all of these other people that you won't vote for them if they won't make a demand of Nancy Pelosi. And I think that's, in a very basic sense, that seems reasonable and acceptable to me. I don't know what is realistic. I don't know what's possible. I don't know if it shoots us in the foot to prematurely have a vote on Medicare for all when we don't have the power in the House and the Senate to pass it. I certainly know that the Republicans who wanted to repeal Obamacare constantly brought that up for a vote, and it had an effect because it kept feeding the very people who were in their base. So why not keep bringing Medicare for all up for a vote? And it can fail every other week in whatever form that it is brought, and people can see where these politicians stand. I don't have a problem with that, especially when we're facing gridlock and not a whole lot's going to be done anyways. Why not have these performances? And what's wrong with performance? I mean, the Democratic Party is for performance. What was the Kenta cloths that they wore around their necks, Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and the kneeling, and when they got down and pretended like they're on the side of the Black Lives Matter movement, even as they show contempt for the very organic demand of redirecting funds from police departments to other parts of our cities and states, so that these so that we can live in places where half of the budget isn't going towards police. Well, that was a performance. They weren't doing anything. We've seen them pretend to put on sit-ins in order to challenge Republicans. But those aren't anything but theater. That's what that is. And so I think that this is something that is fair to do. And I don't have a problem with people, whether they're comedians or whether they're commentators, making demands. I'm a journalist first and foremost, so I can't really do anything in the way of organizing. That's not the way in which I work, but I give platforms to people who are organizers. I'm willing to talk with people who are involved in organizing work, especially when they get targeted and they have their character assassinated for challenging and trying to alter the system and the way in which everything is organized for the better of us. And I agree. There's a lot of questions that we need to ask here of people who are elected progressives and what they're trying to do, and exactly what role they want to play, and if they want to befriend Nancy Pelosi, and if they're afraid to get on the bad side of Chuck Schumer, or to alienate certain individuals within the Democratic National Committee, then I think that that's something that should be treated as a negative. But I think all of these, like, everyone's complex, and I am not here to attack any individuals, but I do agree with the very essential point here that by not taking some kind of action to challenge Nancy Pelosi, if she's going to be speaker again, by not taking some kind of challenge, they are showing how powerless they are, and they are accepting that powerlessness by not going down with a fight. And for some reason, there is this fear promoted that we're going to get a Republican speaker of the House if everyone doesn't line up and support Nancy Pelosi. I don't think that's right. That seems fake to me. It seems similar to this whole idea that we need Cedric Richmond, a black man who comes from Louisiana and is supported by polluters and oil interests. He's got to be the guy that is the liaison with anyone who's working on environmental causes. Well, that just means that the only people you can think of that are diverse are all shills for corporations. So we need to see the list of people expanded, and that'll only happen by those like you who demand that we have more individuals who are options. How do we get not shitty people to be in the Biden administration, or how do we get not shitty people to represent us? I mean, that only comes from people making demands of individuals. I don't know. Maybe AOC isn't sure that she could get anywhere by challenging Nancy Pelosi's candidacy for speaker. Maybe she doesn't think it will amount to anything, but it's certainly clear that the way that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have handled the pandemic is awful. And the way in which she won't back stimulus checks for people, very little basic things that could be done, that in one hand could distract from the very way wealth has been redistributed through the CARES Act, and the way that all of these people who are at corporations have become rich because they were able to obtain wealth through the CARES Act that they didn't need. They weren't in they weren't in trouble like a lot of us. They weren't small businesses. They weren't there. There are congressmen who were abusing this act as well. And at Shadowproof, we did a couple stories, and I know that The Intercept and other places have done some coverage of that as well. So, yeah, I do believe that Jimmy Dore is doing a decent thing here. I don't know how, I see people say is bad faith. They don't like the tone. They're not sure how. Well, I mean, you know what this is. It's a demand. It's not intended to be polite. He doesn't think that AOC is on our side. And I'm not saying that she's not necessarily, but people are allowed to make demands of politicians. People can say that they want a certain thing, and otherwise they're not going to vote for them. That's democracy to me. That's how we have power. It's not abominable. It's not disgusting for someone to say that they won't vote for a Democrat if they can't get something for their vote. I don't believe that that's uncalled for behavior, except it's treated like that. It certainly is treated like that in our world. And our two-party system benefits from a whole section of the country, somewhere around half the country, believing that it's purity politics to vote their principles. And we have to get away from that. And I don't know how we do. And I'm not sure that this broadcast is the proper time to untangle that mess. But I do believe that the reaction that we are seeing from those who are outraged that demands have been put on elected progressives it's something, and I think faint signals, you bring up another thing. It's the celebritification of our politics. Is AOC an elected representative, or is she a celebrity? Is Ilhan Omar a celebrity? Is Rashida Tlaib a celebrity? Do we treat them polite, and do we not make demands because they are well known and we're afraid of what will happen when we oppose them? Well, certainly a good example here is Justin Jackson on the Los Angeles Chargers, who I encourage everyone to go watch the conversation that unfolded thanks to the platform that Katie Halper has with her show, where she was able to get people together. David Sirota, Matt Stoller. Some of you are mentioning it here in this conversation. And Brianna Joy Gray came on, and Jimmy himself were on, and they were all talking about this and disagreeing with each other. And it did get contentious. And I think that that's fine, because it brought out a lot of points that we need to grapple with in the long term, because I do believe we're in trouble if we don't come up with some answers. I don't think we're that powerful, our side. I don't think that we have a lot of access to areas that we need access to in order to protect people from further harm. I feel like there's a sort of temporary victory. It's not really a victory. There's a temporary where it's like being in the eye of a storm in a hurricane. Like electing Joe Biden eventually we're going to be back in stormy weather, and it's not going to be good enough that we elected Joe Biden, because it's going to be proven that that's not enough to avert the many catastrophes that lie ahead for our country. And so with that, I can't be opposed to anyone who says they're done with electoral politics. I myself stay very focused on issues. We stay very focused on issues over at Shadowproof. We spend some time on electoral politics as we have to, because that's where the people's minds are usually, and it's suffocating and you can't escape it. But, with my work, I do a whole lot on the whistleblowers, the war on whistleblowers, WikiLeaks, and Julian Assange. And I thank you all for being here to follow this update and this broadcast. I thank you. There's a few of you out there who chipped in a few dollars to support our work. Thank you very much. We know that. I was about to conclude, but I have to jump in here because I see someone mentioning Chinagate. I see faint signals you're mentioning. You have a lot of good ideas that you're putting out here. At Chinagate is definitely going to be the thing that Republicans go at for the next 4 years in order to discredit Biden, and they're going to do the same thing that was done with Russiagate. And maybe we're just going to oscillate between the two from now on. Whomever runs for office is either going to be accused of being compromised by Russia or China. Maybe at some point we'll see somebody be accused of being compromised by Iran or Venezuela or some other country. But right now it's pretty clear that it's going to stay within the realm of this great power competition, as they call it, in the U.S. government. And the Democrats put together a fine blueprint that the conservatives, that the Republicans in Congress are going to be able to just reuse and reuse and reuse. And so they've done the same with identity politics. They're getting pretty good at using the Democrats or the liberals' identity politics in order to advance their causes. So that is going to, I think, define the next 4 years of a Biden presidency in some way. In addition to a lot of the things we remember from Obama's presidency returning. Like, we're going to hear and know about drone warfare more often, and probably going to see some anger over leaks, and there'll probably be more whistleblower prosecutions, and who knows? If Donald Trump doesn't pardon Assange or does not pardon Snowden, we know that those are going to remain stories that unfold that will need coverage. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in to this broadcast. I appreciate your support, and I'll be back soon with some more conversation on what's happening. There's certainly a lot going on, and it's great to be here and talk with all of you. You have a good night.